Hey everybody, it's John Pollock with you alongside John Ramdeen and Robin Black. This Saturday, it's the TUF 24 finale card. We now have the opponent for Demetrious Johnson. Tim Elliott will go into this fight. And
wasn't he cut from the UFC?
He was, but he's now back.
Cut from the UFC.
This was a surprise.
It was not a surprise. Everybody knew this.
Josh Gross, I think, broke this story. What, week one?
I think the thing is, if you've seen Tim Elliott fight and you looked at the roster, as much as we wanted Yanni Sherbatov to win the fight because we know the guy, you look at everybody on the roster and Demetrious Page and Tim Elliott based on their experience and the fact that Tim Elliott shouldn't have been cut from the UFC, you had a feeling that he would eventually make his way to the end.
He's a great fighter.
Yes, he is.
He's a great fighter and a very tough fighter to plan for and a tough fighter to figure out. But he's, we're talking about fighting the best fighter in the game. The very best fighter. I'm just in such a good mood today when I realize that I get to watch Demetrious Johnson fight on Saturday night.
Is that the intrigue of this? It's just simply Demetrious Johnson is fighting, and I think almost the opponent, with all due respect to Tim Elliott, it doesn't even matter. It's simply you're tuning in to see, man, can Demetrious Johnson slip up? That's about it. That's the drama of this because he's run through everyone. When you have a co-feature with Joseph Benavidez and Henry Cejudo, which to me, that's the fight I'm most looking forward to on Saturday. Two guys who have a combined 3 losses to Demetrious Johnson at this point.
I want to see some cool stuff with Demetrious Johnson. I want to see him do some new things because everybody expects him to be on a different level in comparison to everybody else in the entire sport. Will he be able to do it against a guy like Tim Elliott who doesn't fight traditionally?
So DJ took those guys out 3 times between them. The last 2 times he took them out both in the first round. Just dismantled them. And they're the number 2 and 3, or certainly Joseph Benavidez is the second best 125-pounder on planet Earth. So how are we gonna talk about this for the next 3 days? We're gonna do a UFC preview show. We're gonna talk about it now. We're going to bring up Matt Serra. Matt Serra went in there and laid out George St. Pierre. It can be done.
God, you can tell when they really have to hook you on a fight where there's such a disparity. That is the go-to example. I mean, we're talking about.
You need examples.
He won tough.
It happened once. It happened once.
He won tough. Yeah. He had been cut. It's the same thing, right? There's a story. The one thing that has to be examined, and truthfully, and I'm a Matt Serra nut hugger. I just want to get up on that guy's nuts and just hug him. Because he's a badass and he's interesting and he's smart and he's talented. And he was the UFC welterweight champion. That's super legit.
Beat George St. Pierre.
He beat George St. Pierre. And he earned that, and that is Matt Serra's to own forever. But I think he will also admit that in these moments in time, when you go in there, you believe, you're chasing it, you're confident, you're at your best. Also, George was not. And that failure has to take place. Holly Holm beat Ronda Rousey. She was at her best. She came prepared. It was a diminished Ronda Rousey. And we need a diminished Demetrious Johnson for this to happen. And we're not going to get one. Demetrious Johnson doesn't have it unless he's somewhere smoking crack and partying and getting prostitutes and who knows what, and he's gone completely off the tracks.
Not happening.
But that is not happening. Demetrious Johnson does not smoke crack or get prostitutes. He plays video games and trains fighting, and he's going to have an amazing performance.
Another Robin Black headline. So this final was taped all the way back August the 10th. Demetrious Johnson was there watching the final, and this was a season of The Ultimate Fighter that not a lot of people watched. But I thought this was a pretty quality season. Having watched the whole thing, there were some really outstanding flyweights. I could see Eric Shelton really maturing into a much better fighter. Hiromasa Ogikubo, who went right to the finals, I think looked very impressive throughout this season. But it always goes back to the same question at the end of a season of TUF, John, is this format still viable? I would argue no. So much money is put into the production of this show. It does 300,000 or so viewers every week, and not a whole lot of people have been following this season, and it's Demetrious Johnson against a guy that maybe they remember from his past UFC tenure.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you do have to take away from this season as a lot of people believe it's one of the best seasons. If you've been skill-wise, if you've watched this
great
season,
finishes, there were some great fights.
Exactly.
Like quality-wise, I don't have any complaints.
And what you have done, if you're the UFC, is you've kind of introduced the world to the 125-pound fighters, and you get to take a lot of those. You would have to imagine the UFC's not going to get rid of everybody that didn't make it on the show. Now there's a crop of 125-pound fighters they can groom for the future, because right now it feels like it's one person in that division it's worth watching for, being Demetrious Johnson. However, it's a very, as you pointed out, the co-featured bout between Benavidez and Henry Cejudo, very, very interesting. But outside of that, what other big fights or fighters can you think of at 125 pounds? So if you introduce this lot of fighters, hopefully a couple of them will become stars.
You know, the discussion of people watching the flyweights, and even at one point the bantamweights and the featherweights, you know, do they watch it, will they watch it, why don't they, etc. That's a weird one for me. Because this, by far, they're the most talented and the technically the best, and that's not just a fighting thing. There are no 6'4" gymnasts. There are no 6'4" Olympic gymnasts because there's a certain size physiologically with which human beings can express skill at a higher level. So they're the very best. Also, in context, when you put the camera on both of them, you take the ref out of the way, you can't tell how big or small anybody is. So visually, there's really no difference. They're of the same size as if they were 6'4" or 5'2". It's irrelevant. So it's, I think, a concept as to why people, you know, whether, and we've got guys in the office that are like, oh, they're so little, they couldn't hurt me. Demetrious Johnson would lay out every single person watching this right now. Every single one of you. With one shot, lay you out. So I don't know what that's about.
I'm with you. I don't think the size means anything. I don't think anyone looks at Ronda Rousey being
135 pounds.
135 pounds with Conor McGregor being 145 or 155. I think size is completely irrelevant. I mean, there is something to having a star quality that attracts the masses, and then some who don't. Demetrious Johnson is as technically proficient as any fighter in the world.
And that's what we should be watching out for.
And talking about. Yeah. And that's what we do talk about. And ultimately, when Conor McGregor will fight a Nate Diaz, there'll be like 2 million people will watch. Like, it's crazy. But there's 300,000 or 400,000 people who just love mixed martial arts. And those people will like the best fighters. On top of that, the people who come in and throw down $60 to watch that guy who talked like crazy and threw a soft drink and whatever at people, that's a whole different thing. And those conversations don't have to connect.
Final thing on this card. For Joseph Benavidez, Henry Cejudo, how much are they rooting for a Tim Elliott win on Saturday? And for many flyweights. And on top of that, would this division benefit from a title loss by Demetrious Johnson? Or do you feel that for these fighters, it would give them new life? Would it change the division at all?
Yeah,
because you have the best fighter in the world.
Yeah, I know.
That holds this title.
It's very interesting. What I think I would like to see is somebody actually be a serious challenge to Demetrious Johnson. I think that's what the division needs. Quality opposition, maybe in the form of Dominic Cruz. And I know Dominic Cruz, 135 pounds. They have fought in the past. But you need somebody on the skill level of Demetrious Johnson to be able to push Demetrious Johnson, because everybody believes, we all believe on this desk, it's a foregone conclusion that Demetrious Johnson is going to hand Tim Elliott his ass on Saturday.
That's the biggest challenge that Demetrious Johnson has, is Demetrious Johnson. That is the challenge. At some point, where does your ego go? Where does your opinion of self go? Where does your need to strive go? All of those things. If Demetrious Johnson will lose again one day, as will John Jones, as Anderson Silva did and George St. Pierre did. And often what's necessary is something in their psyche to stop that push, that drive to be great. I don't think this Saturday night is that night. And I also think that this very conversation that we're having right now, Demetrious Johnson, Matt Hume, they're well aware of it. The thing that will stop him is himself. And so that's what he has to push through.
That's coming up on Saturday night. Tim Elliott tries to stun everybody as he takes on Demetrious Johnson for the UFC Flyweight Championship.